Hey y'all, welcome to the show. I have Jason with me. I found Jason on TikTok and he talks about the penitentiary life after the penitentiary, and he has quite a story, 14 years lived experience in the system. Hi, Jason.
Hey.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you so much.
I'm honored to be here.
Jason, let's just start at the beginning. How old were you when you started kind of getting involved with the legal system?
For me, my story started at a very young age. I think that first it was started off with psych hospitals back in the 80s. They these places loved at-risk teens where you could just find yourself ended up being there for years on end. And so I started going to them when I was about 10 years old. By the time I was 14, I had found myself in juvenile facilities as far as jails in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's called the Wood Youth Center. Since then, they changed it to the juvenile justice system. But I started going there at an early age.
When did you finally end up in prison?
I had done a short stint in Ohio, enough to know that how the system worked, things like that. I was 22 when my dad died, and I found myself incarcerated in the state of Virginia. I got pulled over. I gave a fake name, and there was 3 copies to the DUI ticket, and I signed that, and of course it carbon copies. So it's like you signed your name 3 different times. That ended me up for 9 years in the state of Virginia for forging and uttering of a public document.
At 22 years old, did they sentence you to 9 years?
Oh, yes.
For signing your name?
Yes.
Do you know how many people I know that have done that are scared when they get pulled over and they give it, even when they don't have warrants or just out of pure fear, they give someone else.
My own sister did something very similar in the state of Indiana, and it was a $50 fine. In the state of Virginia is a Commonwealth state, and so we don't do case law. We make the laws up as we go along. Each case is individualized. And once seemed like once Virginia gets a hold of you, they definitely aren't going to let you go of you very easy. For me, the best thing that could have happened was that I did catch a federal case while I was incarcerated in the state of Virginia, because at the very end of it, when I'm doing my federal paper, Virginia wanted to grab a hold of me and bring me back in again. They had this thing, it's called docket day. Everybody in the county has to go report to the judge every 90 days once you're released from prison. Even though I lived in the state of Indiana, they still wanted me there. But since I was on federal paper, my federal probation officer called there and threatened them and everything else. And they immediately released me, even with only, I think they was trying to say that my interest while I was locked up on the court fines that they had given. You know how they give court fines when you're sentenced? They said that had accumulated to about $7,000. Yeah, it's just crazy.
Going into the prison system, knowing you have a 9-year sentence, 9 years to a 22-year-old, you might not come home till after you're 30. How did that feel? What did that look like for you?
I remember being sentenced, and I've been in trouble before. So when he said 9 years, I'm waiting. Yeah, he's getting ready to suspend a whole bunch. Next case. And I just looked at the attorney and my knees buckled, and I was like, did I just get 9 years? And then it's, going back into your cell and putting your tough guy face on and saying, okay, I got this, and really, starting to figure out your emotions are a mess. But of course, it's not okay to break down. And so you wait for that moment of 2 minutes for peace, and you just fucking flush all this out of your eyes. You're like, okay, you know what? This is what it is, and I got to do it. Nobody's going to do it for me. And I made lots of mistakes along the way.
When you went to court, so you were in the county jail. I want you to tell me how you were dressed. Were you handcuffed? Were you escorted?
So Virginia was very different, especially in Buchanan County. In Buchanan County, it's probably one of the poorest counties in Virginia. And so that particular jail didn't have orange jumpsuits or khakis. You brought your own clothes. You needed to bring a couple pair of sweats. You could have a couple pair of shorts, all t-shirts, no profanity, no pornography, just your standard Walmart, I guess, if you will, shirts. Back then it was called right there by the Buchanan County Jail, they had a place called Magic Mart. And you could go there and you could get all your little jail stuff. And then one person from each pod could bring a TV from home. The jail didn't supply a TV. This was a very, very small jail. They had 3 floors. The second and the third, they were called left and right. Each they could hold up to 12 guys, but typically you'd have 6 in a block. Now I came from the city, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I was used to big block county jails. So this is a different setting altogether. So I went to court, and I guess what you would call your jail sweats, you had your best ones on, and you go there. And I knew I was being sentenced that day. I knew I'd already done 6 months in the county jail at this time. And I was like, okay, we're getting it over with. I thought I was going over here to get 6 more months. That's what I thought. My dad was a known moonshiner back in his day who was never caught. And he came from a very large family, and they told me that probably the reason I was punished so hard was because once they found out who my father was, it's like, okay, you know what, we got something. Because I've seen other people come with similar charges, but theirs would be where they would forge prescriptions, like the doctor had a prescription pad, and they would forge them, and mine was just on a DUI ticket. And so there's differences, but I seen it all the time. They had a local paper, and I ordered that paper, and I'd watch many people get the same forgery and uttering. They'd get 2 years, 6 months. If they were mad at them, they'd get 3 years. And I was just like, man, they just slaughtered me with this charge.
Wow. The inconsistencies in our legal system, our justice system, they just never cease to amaze me. We saw that often, right? Being incarcerated, people with the same charge, people doing the same things in prison. And in Texas, we have parole. You would see 2 people with the same charge, not getting in trouble, going to school, and one person gets sent home and one gets set off after set off after set off.
I seen a murderer. And he came back. He was fighting the case. He'd already done like 2 years, and he was fighting the case. And he subpoenaed a bunch of people that were already been sentenced, and they were in the prison system. So here they brought this tiny jail, brought about 15 hardened cons back to the jails, and this guy was able to fight the case and end up with a new plea that would send him with involuntary manslaughter to go home after 2 years. I mean, you're right. I see pedos. They get 6 months. I seen the crime never fit the time. I mean, over and over again. And so a lot of people go into the system with a lot of hate and a lot of anger, and you can find yourself in groups of people that have all that. And so it takes a lot. You have to do a lot of soul searching to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take this experience and I'm going to turn it around. Mine wasn't in the beginning. I didn't turn it around in the beginning. I turned it around towards the end. But mine was a path where I think that I experienced everything that prison had to offer. At some point, I said, okay, this is enough. I don't want this anymore. But it took a lot for me to get there. I caught a federal charge while I was locked up in a maximum security prison. I can see all the time where, especially new guys with life, you just see the anger and the hurt and the hidden emotions that are behind 7 layers of the onion, so to speak.
You were probably a pretty angry kid going into the system at 22.
Oh, I was pissed. I was pissed at the state of Virginia. I was pissed at life for, taking my dad. Like I took I didn't even get to the funeral. I came down there to bury my dad and I never made it to the funeral. I made it behind bars, and I had a cousin that was in there and they let him out to go to my dad's funeral, but they didn't let me because I was from out of state.
This is why you're in county jail. You're not even technically you're still innocent at this point, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's
you hadn't
correct.
been sentenced. You could have gone to your dad's funeral. That's insane. I'm so sorry that you didn't get to do that. That's horrible. Are you comfortable sharing how you caught a federal charge while you were incarcerated?
Yeah, yeah. It didn't take long, and I knew I started into the county jail. I kind of knew what prison was about. So, okay, I'm going to be the best card player. I'm going to be the best hustler. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to start tattooing. And I was just anything that there was that was going to make money, I was involved in. I don't know how it is in women's prison. I know that you did quite a bit in the women's prison, but in most men's prisons, even pictures are a commodity, or there's a dollar amount. There's a dollar amount to everything, and whatever it was, if I can make a dollar off of it, I was definitely into that, hustling, hustling, hustling. And so between there, as I evolved in a hustler, I met a lot of hustlers, and they'd always tell me, man, if you can make $100 a day in prison, you're doing good. I don't know. I thrived to even do better than that. I think I kind of stumbled it on because I wasn't a technical person either. I didn't grow up with computers in my bedroom. There was somebody on the outside that said, "Hey, you know what? If you can get some information, we can get some student loans. We can do student loans." And I kind of knew that there was a money, but I thought it was like a one-time thing as well. So I approached one of the guys that I kicked it with, and he didn't have very much money. He didn't have anybody on the outside sending him something in. So it was always, hey, you know what? Can I get a shot of coffee? And that's what I had. And I didn't mind. My people took care of me, and so I didn't have a whole bunch of struggles. But I also hustled it, and I would turn $20 into 100. And so the guy that I hung out with, I said, hey, you know what? Let me hook you up. And I sent some money and had some money into his books. And then it just seemed like from there, it just started escalating. And I picked up 3 or 4, and I had a CO working with me. Next thing you know, it was like the whole compound was just, there was money everywhere. And I knew that I needed to stop. I knew that I needed to stop. But even wanting to stop in the prison system, there's always somebody or an organization that is bigger than you, and there's a bigger picture. And these organizations weren't going to let me stop. But I also became like, I didn't have any worries. I didn't have worries like some new guys. They would come in and, they might be worried because they are the smaller group. All right. And especially young white kids, they would come in and they would try to fit in. I never had these issues because right away I was just into, hustling, and different organizations, they seen the value that I brought. So I didn't have a lot of issues with people, but that also meant that when things started coming down, I was a hot target. Meaning, I think the beginning of the end came. I had a guy who worked in the mailroom, and he came to me and he told me, hey, there was 10 money orders that came from Indiana today, and they were all in sequence. And I knew right then and there the gig was up, but it kept on for another couple more years. There wasn't, I could just say, I put the brakes on it. It's got to stop. It was like, oh my God, I'm in too deep. I can't stop. My life is at risk if I stop. And that's how I felt during that course of time.
That's so similar. That feeling when you're caught, but there's nothing else. Like, what can you do? That was the same with my crime, Jason. That same, like,
Yeah.
I knew way ahead of time that I should be stopping. Tried to stop a few times, but then that feeling when it's up, and you're just waiting in dread, living your life in dread.
Yeah. Yes.
You talked about the organizations in prison and how you made yourself valuable so that you weren't really a target for things. You were valued. Can you talk about how are the organizations gang life in Virginia prisons, in Texas prisons, men's prisons? They're very segregated and they're very much affiliated. Women's prisons, not so much.
It's very segregated. It's very affiliated. Probably not as much on the smaller levels, but when you start getting into threes and fours, fives and sixes, you're dealing with different type of mentalities. All right. The goal is not to go home. The goal is to feed that instant gratification all the time. That is something that can be very scary if you're not doing the dance, I guess. It's an everyday, hey, you know what, I'm gonna go out and maneuver this, maneuver that. I think Kevin Gates says, land full of lollipops, I'm trying to be sucker free. And that's for me, that was kind of the thing that I lived by every day. And I think though that for me, I think the key to my success in there was that I always focused on building relationships. All right. I didn't care what affiliation, who you were affiliated with. All right. Can I work with you? Can we get along? Can I trust you? Not to stab me when my back is turned. And these relationships, I think, it would set me up to be successful in prison and out of prison. Even more today, I still work on building relationships. You put me in front of somebody, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to make sure that this person and I will have a positive experience and we can move on and have growth in this, especially if it's something that's beneficial to all parties.
The way you're describing kind of your attitude during your incarceration, it reminds me of like Survivor or some kind of show like that.
I tell everybody if they put me on Survivor, I'm going to win.
Can we talk about staff inmate relationships in men's prisons?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you want to ask about staff and inmates relationships. When I was down, the very first female that I ever seen in prison, I ended up in a relationship with. All right. We went from a men's dominated, COs to at the end of everything of mine. I mean, there were more women in the men's prison than there were male guards. So it definitely changed over time. And I think having that happen, you open the doors up for relationships, especially CO to inmate relationships. And it is a common occurrence. And it could be, sometimes it's just for pure financial, meaning a person has decided that they have a commodity that's going to sell really, really big in the prison system, and it's worth a lot of money and people will pay for it. And so you're only building those 10-minute and 20-minute relationships. But other times people have long-standing relationships. I've seen female guards quit their job and even be upfront about it. Hey, you know what? I'm quitting. I'm going to be, this and that. And sooner or later, that person gets moved to a different prison and they're right in, and 10 years later, they're still together. And then, of course, there is the negative side of things, where a person has a relationship with a guard and they're getting special treatment, and that brings extra attention from all sides of the fishbowl. Everybody in the fishbowl was looking at this person is getting more attention, and there's, whether it's haterade or they're just hating on this person or they're jealous. There's a whole bunch of things that come with that. And then if you wanted to say on both sides of each other, as far as inmate to inmate relationships, those happen all the time. I've seen plenty. Most of it, I would say, is willing. Most participants are willing. Does lots of other things happen? Yes. In a men's prison, though, that's usually treated like it's a punishment. It's a punishment. It's not about sex. It's about power. And of course, there's COs that come in and try to press themselves against other people. So all these things happen in that whole setting. I mean, it's just They say it's a jungle, and that's what it is. And it is survival of the fittest.
I talked with one of my friends who did his time in Pennsylvania, and he's a very inclusive person, but he said while he was in prison, he did not talk to anybody that was openly gay or homosexual. He said because that would have made him a target. And I'm just curious how that scene was in Virginia prisons for you.
I think in every one of my experiences, every one of the prisons that I've ever been to, you have to really, really assert yourself to be able to have any type of relationship with an openly gay person. I can give you an example. There was in Virginia, I'll never forget, there was this guy, and he went by Jenny, and he was very, very openly gay. And he was also a hellacious poker player. And he came with the poker table with lots of money, and everybody they put it aside that he was gay because everybody's trying to get the almighty dollar. Soups and mackerels. So, but I remember one time I've been cleaning the table all day, been cleaning it out, just getting the money. And it comes down to a hand, it's the end of the night, and it's me and him. And we got in such a heated argument that I was like, hey, I got 3 boxes I'll put on this hand. Right? I brung them out to the table. Yeah. Call. Right? Took every fucking penny I had. At the end of the night, I, tuck my tail up. I go into my cell, and I'm like, all right, I know how to start over. I gotta do this guy's tattoo tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking, how am I getting on, right? This dude, he brung me enough to eat and probably gave me about $20 or $30 back. He was like, here you go. And I was like, no, you want that shit. I was like, that ain't me. And he just turned out to be a really, really good guy. In that hand, we became friends, and I was able to conquer that, because before him, I would not have been able to say, hey, this is a friend. And after that, I didn't mind eating with him. I was like, man, shit, you know what? He's just like us. He's just like somebody else. And so you have to be very confident to overcome the stigma of, oh my God, he's talking to somebody that's gay. You have to be. But I also, during this time, I had set myself up. So, I could go and sit down. I was friends with leaders of organizations that typically didn't sit down with white guys. So I was different, but I brought a lot of money into the institution. So doors were open for me that weren't open for others.
You said you brought 3 boxes to the table. What are boxes?
Oh, like it's your Foot Locker that we would have all your stuff in, and I had like a lot of commissary, so I had different boxes in people's rooms. So I went and dragged them to the table. They have little handles on them. In Virginia, they used to be metal lockers. They're not no more, but they used to be metal lockers. And that was your Foot Locker. You put everything you owned in it. As soon as you got up, it was supposed to be in there. Lots of times that didn't happen, but that's what's supposed to happen. But since I would rent other people's boxes out, and I would make sure that these people get fed, and I would just have lots of money spread out the pods.
So you were storing some of your commissary items in other people's boxes, and you were they were making a commissary list for you every store, or what?
No, it wasn't like that, but I definitely made sure that they ate. When I would eat, and the people that I'm storing in their boxes, I made sure they eat. It wasn't nothing. I wouldn't say it was anything significant. You're talking about, hey, making sure that somebody has the essentials of life: toilet paper, soap, shampoo, toothpaste, some soups and mackerels, just to get through the week. But yeah, because I had a significant amount, $250,000 split between 4 people, and trying to get your cut in prison becomes a whole nother hassle.
Just real quick, because you mentioned making sure people had their hygienes. Can you tell me what, and I want to talk about the other institutions also, but I'm wondering what the state gave you in prison as far as hygienes.
And in Virginia, where I did the bulk of mine, they gave you one roll of toilet paper a week, and you got a bar of soap twice a month. That's what they gave you.
No toothpaste,
No toothpaste. No,
no deodorant.
you did get. I think it was two stamp envelopes a week. I think that was it. I can't remember if it might have been one. It was in the beginning. You would just put like if you didn't have a stamp. I think it was on Friday. You could mail a letter, and you would just put SS up at the corner where a stamp went, and that was your state stamp. And they didn't really track that, so everybody would just write a free letter a week.
Where else did you do time at?
I did time in Milan, Michigan, which would have been the federal system. And then I also did time at IYC in Indiana.
You were in and out of institutions as a youth. Did you do time in a prison as a youth?
Yes, I did time in they call it Tico. It's in Columbus, Ohio. My mom had moved away from Indiana into Columbus, trying to get away from my dad, who was an abusive alcoholic. And so we went to Columbus, Ohio, and I just took myself with me, and I ended up at Tico, and I did about 6 or 7 months there. I had stolen my time in Columbus, Ohio. Me and a buddy, we had stole about 20 cars and went all over the country, just doing dumb shit. Yeah, I did time in Tico. I had been locked up in Indiana at their just like a juvenile county jail. I think all these things, even graduating from Tico in Ohio I went to their beginner prison. So they have a receiving center in Orient, Ohio. I went there, and then they have what I always call it the beginner prison. It was in Nelsonville, Ohio, and it was almost like work release, but it's also different, but it's similar. And they had the fence and everything, and it was just make your bed and this and that. At the end of that, it was called the bat phone. You go pick up the phone if you didn't want to comply, and they take you back to the county jail, and you could just go do your time. I picked up the bat phone, and so then they sent me to a regular prison, and I did probably about 4 or 5 months there. Nothing of significant. Nothing. Only thing I did there is learn how the system was. It's like, okay, you know what, I can move and groove through this. And then I got out, and then my father died, and I ended up in Virginia.
In Texas, our reports coming from the youth prisons are proving that the conditions in our youth prisons are far worse than our adult prisons. And so I was just curious your experience with that.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I remember being a kid and they would, you'd have 20 kids to a room. And in my hometown in Fort Wayne, Indiana, during my day when it was called Wood Youth Center, they would put 20 kids into a room, and before you could go into the room, you had to take your shoes and your pants off. So you could only have boxers and a t-shirt going into your room. All right. So I think they thought that the shoes was nobody was going to kill themselves or beat each other up. And the pants was if you did get out the window, you wasn't going to go far in just your boxers. But I think that set up a lot of situations that was not safe for young kids. And especially, in Indiana, they don't mind locking you up at 10 years old. So 10-year-olds, 17-year-olds, we're all going to throw them in a room. And I think that's definitely something wrong with that.
Let's fast forward to the end of your kind of criminal life. When did the end start for you?
The end started in the federal system. I knew that when I got there, and I remember being in front of the federal judge, and I was like, oh no, you got to send me to Atlanta. I want to go to a fucking max. Send me to where the worst of the worst are. And he was like, dude, you don't even qualify, And I'm like, fuck, that's where I've been for the last 9 years. So I knew what max was. And they was like, well, you get to pick. And I'm like, oh, I get to pick. Hey, okay. I get to pick. I picked to be close to home so my mom could come see me and I could have family come see me. In Virginia, I only got to see my mother about once a year. That was a pretty hard time as far as that. Now that I'm in Milan, Michigan, I'm like, okay, some of it's pods, some of it's cells. It's a medium, what the feds call a medium. Very early on, somebody told me, hey, you can get time off your sentence if you sign up for RDAP. And I'm like, okay. So I signed up for RDAP. And they're like, yeah, you're going to get 6 months off. And I'm like, oh, this is great. What do I got to do? And they started putting me in this class. And it's like drug rehabilitation, but also criminal thinking rehabilitation. And that's where my problems were. I had been so institutionalized and into the game of the prison life that I needed to stop and think about this, but I still wasn't done yet. And so I had rented out my brain. So you had to, let's say that you went to class one day, and in this 9-hour class that you're going to go in there and you're going to talk about your feelings and your behaviors and how you can be responsible. Then you would go and you would have a 10-page front and back due by 8 o'clock in the morning. I was really good at this. I'm a writer. I've been writing forever. I even wrote poems in Redstone while I was in prison. So I'm like, this is no problem. I would do mine, and then I would rent out my services, and I'd write other people's. But doing this, I was able to come up with different concepts of, man, you know what? I could do this, or I could do this. And this started to affect me positively and saying, you know what? I can change my behavior because I came up with different scenarios to act in every situation. I'll give you just a little bit. When I first got out of the feds, I went to this place. I'm in my time cut phrase where they're supposed to send you to a halfway house. My halfway house was shared with the county, so it was house arrest as well, or not house arrest, or work release for the county. So we shared a building, shared rooms. You had fed inmates, and then you had county work release people there. I went to this job, and this person, man, he was talking sideways out the side of his neck at me. And I'm used to, like, I don't give a about no camera or anything. Look, you know what? I was never the one to be like, hey, we can take it in the cell. No, we can handle that right now, right here. I remember looking at this guy and I thought, man, I'm gonna walk away from this. And I walked away and I felt really bad. And even into the next day, I had to sit back and rejudge myself and say, man, why did you do that? You know, what is wrong with you? You're soft. Doing that early on, I think it started to open a door of, okay, you know what? I'm not on a prison yard. I don't have nothing to prove. And it started opening up my attitude. And with that, man, I kicked down the change door and let the change come in.
That's amazing. It's so true that it's like a learned behavior. And probably yours started very young because you were in and out of institutions at such a young age. But I just know the learned behavior that I had during my incarceration, the rules are different. And what's acceptable in prison is quite different. And they're not necessarily things that are positive for you or that are going to give you positive results, right?
Oh, that's 100% true. 100% true.
Jason, how have you taken that change of mindset? What are you doing with that now?
It's still a constant change. It's still a constant work. I have to work on me every day. I would say even to the point of, other normal people out here, they have, I'm 49 years old, and many adults my age have many years of experience of adulting. And sometimes, somebody will say, hey, you know what, maybe you ought to rethink this. And so I have to always be open to guidance from even people younger than me and saying, hey, you know what, you know something more than me. And so one, it's being open. I think that and saying, you know what, there's a whole bunch of people out here that can teach me. I think another thing was a chance. The company that I worked for Take 5 Oil Change, and it allowed me to take the skills that I learned in prison, and instead of hustling for this and that and being positive with it and doing something, that's going to benefit the community or people as a whole. And that's, one, it's building relationships. I'm able to build relationships within just a few more quick minutes of meeting somebody. And then I turn that into an experience of somebody that comes through my company, and, they get the whole experience, and it's the wow factor and trying to wow people, but also at the same time being genuine and saying, look, there's nothing fake. I can tell you everything, and I let it out to be known. You know, a lot of people, they come to me and they say, oh man, aren't you afraid that if somebody finds out about this, they're going to go tell? And I'm like, no, not at all, because I put it all out there. I don't have any secrets, so there's nothing that's gonna, oh, we're gonna go say this about this to them about you. Okay, cool. You know, make sure they follow me on TikTok. That's what I say, because even my haters pay me.
Let's talk about your social media. And I found you on TikTok. I love what you're doing there. If you guys like my content, you will for sure like Jason's. So make sure and follow him there. Do you know your handle off the top of your head for TikTok? And then you just started a YouTube channel also.
Yes, yes. Both of those are going to be the tatted, not the tatted. Who's your guy? Because I'm from Indiana. We're going to plug Indiana. All right. I'm a tatted. Who's your guy? And that's on TikTok as well as YouTube.
And then you do some Instagram and Facebook stuff also, right?
Yes, yes, I do. And all that's my Instagram is Paul Jason Justice, as well as my Facebook as well.
Awesome. I need to find you on both of those platforms. I'm on there as well. So I want to just swing back just really quickly because we didn't talk about the things that you got some training during your incarceration. And so let's talk about that real quick. What kind of training did you get in there from the state? What did they offer?
No. It wouldn't have been that type of training. I learned to sell. I learned to sell drugs, pornography, relationships. I became really good at sales and human relationships. That's the training that I got. I really didn't know that I was good at it. You know, I knew that I was like, you know, I could connect with people, things like that, but I didn't know. I mean, I was very young going in, and so that's the training. You know, I think I just made friends with the right people. You know, even when do you know what Tucci is?
No.
Okay, so it's something new. It wasn't in the beginning, but at the end, it's like, I think it's bug spray that they spray on paper and then they send it into the prisons. Okay, well, you know your ID card or how big an ID card is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, they would send that into the prison, and some of these guys from the organizations, you know, they liked me and I had built relationships, and they would just bring me an ID card that's about as big, and that's about $500. And they would just be like, hey, you know what? Bring me 300. Bring me 300, and boom, I'd have that before noon. And so they knew I was just a shaker and a mover, and I was able to, you know, create sales. And I just took that same mindset, and I was like, okay, you know what? I can be positive out here in the world. And I, you know, it wasn't like I knew, hey, I'm going to go out and be in sales. That wasn't it either. It was just like I kind of fell into it, and then I'm like, oh. And the corporate company, they was like, man, you just made $400,000 in 90 days for our company. Thank you so much. And I'm like, huh, what'd I do? How'd I do that? And I just started to get noticed, and I started being promoted, and I grew with this company. And I mean, I can't say enough about a company that can say, you know what, we don't care about your past. We're going to worry about today. When these types of companies grab a hold of people that are saying, hey, I'm done. I don't want to do that stuff anymore. I want something new. And even though, you know what, they might be older because maybe they did 10, 15, 20 years. But in the end, I believe the company actually wins. They win with tax breaks, but they win with getting a solid person that says, hey, you know what, I'm motivated. I know where the bottom is, and I don't want to be there.
I could not have said it better myself. For sure, the hardest workers that I've ever worked around, the most self-motivated people are people that have had a past, that they know what it is to be at the bottom, and they're just constantly trying to pull their way up. So I love that. And then I'll say about you kind of took street skills and turned them into, and I've seen that too in sales. In the same area. If you guys are out there hustling like that, hustling on the streets, hustling in the prison system, you can turn that into a legal hustle for sure.
Oh, for sure. And I think another of it is believe in yourself. And I think that, you know, my company actually, they built the confidence in me that, you know, even said, for me, you know what? I'm going to put all my chips on the table. I mean, I left Indiana. I left Indiana. I put everything into a Honda Civic, and I bet on me. I put all my chips in, and I said, I'm all in. Coming down here to Florida has been one of the most amazing things I've ever done. I've met the most wonderful people. It's life changing. And if you want to know more, follow me on TikTok.
Definitely, you guys follow Jason for sure. I want you to kind of think about, what do you feel like maybe the community could have done for 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old Jason, who his parents had struggles because of your dad? And what do you think, besides institutionalization, might have helped you when you were younger?
I've thought about this a lot, and I think here's my answer, and it's just going to be cut and dry. And that's, if we take our at risk, we see they're at risk. You know, when you have a 10-year-old go in front of a judge, he's at risk or she's at risk. All right. These young kids, they're at risk. And from there, you know, I think the focus needs to be on what type of skills can we give this person and train them in. All right. And it's not some of the typical things that we've done before, but I really, really do believe, okay, let's say that I will take Habitat for Humanity. I love Habitat for Humanity. All right. They're helping people that would never own houses. And I love that about them. And I think that if you also took 10, 12, 14, 16-year-olds and say, hey, look, we're going to go out and we're going to help somebody build a house today. All right. And at the end of the day, you know, we're going to just kind of network, have a little meal or something, maybe take some pictures. All right. You're giving them something that, even if it doesn't sit in today, in the future, when they drive past that house in their neighborhood or their community, they're going to say to somebody, hey, I built that house. I built that house. And that's always going to draw them back and say, you know what, I can complete something. When the task, it seems like you cannot complete it, and then you look back and you said, I did that. That's a step in building confidence. And I think that's where our at-risk people, they don't have the confidence. They don't believe in themselves. I didn't believe in myself. It took a lot. It took a lot of the right people to believe in me. And I think that's where we start. I think that's where we start to end gang violence. We start, I mean, we start in the prison systems, but we also start on the street and let people know that this is not okay. This is not a life that you want. And it starts with these young kids.
Thank you, Jason. You have given us so much insight. Thank you for sharing your story. I think that your story, I love that you're sharing it across all of these platforms, because I think it's very relatable for a lot of people. And I just love to see people coming out of their past, overcoming their past. And I couldn't applaud you more.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.